Good afternoon, I'm Karen Holmes Ward and welcome to Cityline. Today we're going to hear from a local epidemiologist who says we have a lot of work to do when it comes to racial and economic inequality in order to battle this pandemic and the next one. Plus, a civil rights attorney uses her experience to craft a coming-of-age story that illuminates the ways African-American history informs the present. But we begin with a familiar face based here in the Boston area, working to educate and end gender-based violence. 30 years ago, the world learned Anita Hill's name at the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. She testified then that she experienced sexual harassment from Thomas. Today, Anita Hill is a professor at Brandeis University in Waltham and a leading advocate in the fight against gender-based violence. That's also the topic of her new book, Believing. And Anita Hill joins me now. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. It's a beautiful day in Boston.
Thanks, Professor Hill, for joining us. So you write in the introduction that you are no longer patient when it comes to addressing the issue of gender-based violence. What do you mean by that?
Well, after 30 years of hearing from survivors and victims about their painful experiences and lack of responses when they raise complaints, or their inability to raise complaints because they couldn't find anyone to complain to who would actually listen to them. You know, I just believe that we are now at a time when the country must do something to eliminate the problem.
Gender-based violence, extremely prevalent and impacts nearly every aspect of women's lives. We hear about it more and more in the media today. If you could just talk about some of the examples of how this has a ripple effect.
Well, the examples really began, as I do in the book, talking about problems in elementary schools where children are bullied, often because of their gender identity or because of their sexual identity. And very often, unfortunately, it happens not only in person, but also cyberbullying occurs, which can cause children to ideate suicide, and infrequently, but too frequently, it results in suicide of children. And that stretches really throughout the lifetimes of people. We know that 50% of the women in workplaces today say that they have been sexually harassed in the workplace, and that can include verbal harassment as well as sexual extortion. We know that gender-based violence is impact people who in their homes in the form of intimate partner violence. 10 million people per year is the estimate today, but that's the pre-COVID number. We know that number surged during the pandemic and when people were on lockdown. So those are the behaviors that I'm addressing in this book, and that I'm suggesting solutions for.
So let's talk about the sexual harassment or intimate partner violence. We often think of those just as private problems, just a few bad apples or just a few people in unhealthy workplaces. But how does that type of thinking about these issues contribute to marginalizing victims and preventing solutions?
Well, in fact, that message that the problem of that people experience when they experience sexual assault or sexual harassment, when they get a response that says basically the problem wasn't that bad, or it wasn't bad enough for us to do anything about it, or you're told that that's just what men do, or that boys will be boys if you're a child, then what it does is to tell victims that their pain isn't important enough, their safety isn't important, and that nothing will be done to protect them. And it tells those individuals who might be behaving badly that their behavior is acceptable and will be tolerated, and the reverse should be true, because you're grooming both people for lifetimes of abuse.
Now, you write
and
in
we've
the book,
seen that in the research.
You know, you write in the book that there will be no complete, and I'm quoting, there will be no complete elimination of gender-based violence until racism in its many forms is identified and addressed, but the reverse is also true. Can you speak to the intersection of gender-based violence and racism?
Well, gender-based violence really stems in large part from misogyny, that is anti-woman sentiment. And it gets overlaid with racism. So you got sexism and racism that comes together when you're talking about women of color. We know that the rates of sexual harassment, the rates of killing and murders is higher for women of color. It's one of every two women who are Native American will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. We know that when individuals, women of color, complain about their abuse, they are less likely to get any kind of effective or helpful response, whether it is from a corporation or from a university or from law enforcement. And so it is what racism does is compound the problem of gender violence. So we've got to deal with the racism along with the problem of gender violence.
You've made ending gender-based violence your life's work and have done, of course, as we know, extensive research and listened to hundreds and hundreds of stories from survivors. Did anything surprise you while you were writing or researching Believing?
Well, I was surprised at the number of men who are suffering in silence. We do have some statistics on the problem of sexual assault of men, but they are often not brought into the conversation about the problem as it exists in our institutions. We usually don't hear from them, and we need to bring them in. One of the most impactful calls that I had, and I've gotten thousands of emails and letters and calls over the years, but one that impacted me greatly was a call from an incest survivor, a man, who related to my experience in testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee and said that it felt very much like his experience when he told his parents that he was being abused by a family member. I really applaud his bravery in even coming forward to me, because I've heard recently from men who have said that they have never been able to divulge their secret about being abused. And that continues to be the case. These are just two examples. So much of this is fairly grim news to people, but I do want people to know that I am hopeful. I am very hopeful because I do see solutions. And I think we are at a good place now to act on those solutions.
Professor Anita Hill, we want to thank you for being here today to share your experiences and to tell us about your new book, Believing. It's available now wherever you get your books.